During Thanksgiving week, a neighbor warned me, "Get your family out of this house tonight." When I asked why, she replied, "You'll find out tomorrow." I trusted her without hesitation, and that decision saved our lives. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving started like any other morning in Cedar Falls, Oregon. I was kneading dough for my famous pumpkin rolls when my phone buzzed against the flour-dusted counter. Louise Feldman, my son Vincent's next-door neighbor, her name glowing on the screen at 7:30 in the morning. "Chrissy," she said, her voice tight and strange, "I need you to listen carefully." I wiped my hands on my apron, something cold sliding down my spine. Louise was not a dramatic woman. In the 3 years since Vincent and his family had moved into that duplex on Oakmont Street, I'd learned she was steady as bedrock, the kind of neighbor who watered your plants without being asked and never gossiped over the fence. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I can't explain right now, but you need to take your family to your house tonight. All of them. Vincent, Caroline, the kids, everyone." My heart hammered. "Louise, you're frightening me." "I know, I'm sorry." There was something else in her voice now, something that sounded like fear. "Just trust me, Chrissy. Get them out of that house. Make any excuse you want, but get them out." "Why? What's going to happen?" A long pause. Traffic sounds in the background. She wasn't calling from home. "You'll know tomorrow," she whispered. "Please, Chrissy." I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent. The line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen, flour on my hands, staring at the phone like it might offer more answers. At 63, I'd raised 3 children, buried a husband, and weathered enough of life's storms to know when something was genuinely wrong. The tremor in Louise's voice wasn't manufactured drama. It was genuine terror. I called Vincent immediately. "Mom, I'm at the station," he answered, and I could hear the familiar background noise of the firehouse, men's voices, equipment clanking. My son had been a firefighter for 18 years, following his father's footsteps into a profession I simultaneously loved and feared. "What's up? I need you and Caroline and the kids to come stay with me tonight." "Tonight?" "Mom, it's the middle of the week. The kids have school tomorrow. They can miss one day." I kept my voice steady, cheerful even. "I'm making Thanksgiving preparations and I'd love the company. Besides, when's the last time we had a sleepover? Emma and Tyler would love it." I could hear his hesitation. Vincent was methodical, a planner. Spontaneity made him uncomfortable. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Everything's fine. I'm just a lonely old woman who wants to spoil her grandchildren." The lie tasted bitter. I'd never lied to my children, not about anything that mattered. "Please, Vincent, humor me." Another pause. Then, "Let me talk to Caroline. I'll call you back." He called back 20 minutes later. They'd come, but I could hear the confusion in his voice, the unspoken questions. Caroline was probably wondering if I was declining mentally, if this was the beginning of something they'd need to manage. I'd worry about that later. That afternoon, I cleaned my guest rooms with unusual care. I'd lived alone in this old farmhouse on the outskirts of Cedar Falls since Thomas died 5 years ago. The place was too big for one person, really, but it was paid off and full of memories I wasn't ready to abandon. Now I was grateful for the space. They arrived at 6, Vincent's truck pulling into my gravel driveway with Caroline's sedan behind it. 8-year-old Tyler burst out first, followed by his 10-year-old sister Emma, both of them excited about the unexpected adventure. Caroline emerged more slowly, her expression polite but puzzled. She was a good woman, my daughter-in-law, though we'd never quite connected the way I'd hoped. She found me old-fashioned, I think. Maybe I was. Vincent kissed my cheek, studying my face. "You sure everything's okay, Mom?" "Positive." I lied again, and hated myself for it. We had dinner, spaghetti and meatballs, the kids' favorite. I watched Vincent throughout the meal, noticing things I'd been too distant to see clearly in recent months. He looked tired. More than tired, worn down. There were circles under his eyes and a tightness around his mouth that spoke of stress he wasn't sharing. "How's work?" I asked as Caroline helped the kids with homework in the living room. "Fine," he said automatically. Then he paused, washing dishes beside me at the sink. Actually, it's been complicated. Complicated? How? He was quiet for a long moment, his hands still in the soapy water. There's been an investigation at the department. Internal affairs. Some irregularities in how certain fire reports have been filed. Something in my chest tightened. What kind of irregularities? I shouldn't really talk about it. He pulled a plate from the water, rinsed it carefully. But there's evidence that some fires that should have been ruled arson were classified as accidental. And some property that burned. The insurance investigations were shut down too quickly. Who's investigating? I am. Sort of. He set the plate in the drying rack. Captain Morrison asked me to look into some discrepancies in old files. Quietly. Just to make sure everything's above board. Captain Harold Morrison. I'd met him at department functions. A broad-shouldered man with a politician's smile and hands that gripped too hard when he shook yours. Something about him had always made me uncomfortable. And, I prompted, and I'm finding things that don't add up. Vincent's voice dropped lower. Mom, I think someone's been manipulating fire investigations. Maybe for years. I've been copying files, matching them against insurance claims, talking to some of the older guys who've retired. There's a pattern. Have you told anyone? Just Captain Morrison. He's the one who asked me to look into it. Vincent dried his hands, his jaw tight. He said he'd handle it through proper channels, but Chrissy, some of the files I found, his signature is on them. My blood went cold. Vincent. I know. He looked at me, and I saw fear in my son's eyes. Real fear. I've been keeping copies of everything at home, in a fireproof safe in the garage, just in case. The pieces were falling into place, terrible and clear. Vincent? I said carefully. If Captain Morrison knows you have evidence that implicates him, what would he do? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We both knew. That night, I lay awake in my bedroom, listening to my family sleep safely under my roof. Louise's warning echoed in my mind. She'd known. Somehow she'd known what was coming. But how? I must have dozed eventually because I woke to my phone ringing in the darkness. 3:15 in the morning, the display said. Louise's number. They're at the house, she whispered before I could speak. 2 men. They broke in through the back. They're pouring something, Chrissy. I can smell it from here. Call the police, I said, already sitting up. I can't. My husband, I can't explain now. But I'm calling you. They're leaving now. Both of them. One of them struck a match. Louise, it's already burning. I'm so sorry, Chrissy. I tried to warn you in time. I was downstairs, turning on lights, my heart a drum in my chest. Vincent, I called up the stairs. Vincent, wake up. He appeared at the top of the landing in his pajamas, disoriented. Mom? What? Your house is on fire. His face went white. He was down the stairs in seconds, grabbing his phone, his keys. Caroline appeared behind him, the kids waking, confused and frightened. Stay here, Vincent ordered. All of you, stay here. I'm coming with you, I said. Mom, I'm coming. We took his truck, speeding through the empty pre-dawn streets of Cedar Falls. I could see the orange glow before we turned onto Oakmont Street. Flames already consuming the roof of the duplex, smoke pouring into the sky. Fire trucks were arriving, sirens wailing, but it was already too late. Vincent stood in the street, watching his home burn, and I saw something break in him. Not just the loss of possessions, though those mattered. Something deeper. The understanding that this wasn't an accident. That someone had done this deliberately. That the evidence he'd so carefully gathered was now ash. The police arrived as the sun came up. They asked questions we couldn't fully answer. How did we know to leave? Why weren't we home? Vincent looked at me, and I saw him understand that somehow, impossibly, I'd known. Or someone had known and warned me. Suspicious circumstances, the lead officer said, taking notes. We'll need to investigate further. Captain Morrison arrived an hour later, his face appropriately concerned, his hand heavy on Vincent's shoulder. Thank God you all got out, he said, and I watched my son look at his superior officer with eyes that now saw clearly. Yeah, Vincent said quietly. Thank God. We drove back to my house in silence. Caroline and the kids were waiting, and the tears came then, the shock and fear and grief all spilling out. But as I held my granddaughter and felt my grandson's arms around my waist, I wasn't thinking about what we'd lost. I was thinking about Louise Feldman, who had known exactly what would happen and exactly when. I was thinking about her husband and her cryptic words about why she couldn't call the police. I was thinking about how a neighbor could know about arson before it happened. And I was thinking that my son wasn't the only one investigating anymore. Whatever dark current ran through the Cedar Falls Fire Department, whatever corruption Captain Morrison was protecting, it had just made a critical mistake. It had threatened my family. And at 63, with more life behind me than ahead, I had exactly nothing left to lose. The morning after the fire, I left Vincent and Caroline sleeping in my guest room and walked across the dew-wet grass to my truck. The kids were still asleep on air mattresses in the den, exhausted from the emotional toll of watching their home burn. I had maybe 2 hours before the house stirred to life. Louise Feldman's address was programmed into my phone from the neighborhood directory Vincent had shared months ago. I'd never visited her house, had only met her twice at Vincent's place during barbecues, but she'd saved my family's lives, and she knew something that could help my son. The Feldman house sat 3 blocks from Vincent's destroyed duplex, a modest ranch-style home with neat flower beds and a gray sedan in the driveway. I knocked softly, aware of the early hour. 6:45 on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Louise opened the door in her bathrobe, her face pale. She was younger than I'd thought, maybe mid-40s, with dark hair pulled back and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept. "Mrs. Brennan," she said, not surprised. "I wondered when you'd come. May I come in?" She hesitated, glanced over her shoulder into the house, then stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind her. "My husband's still asleep. We should talk out here." The November air was cold. I pulled my cardigan tighter. "How did you know?" I asked simply. Louise's hands twisted together. "I can't tell you everything. It would put my family at risk. My son lost everything. His home, his evidence, nearly his life. Your warning saved us, and I'm grateful. But I need to understand what's happening." She was quiet for a long moment, her breath making small clouds in the morning air. Then, "My husband works for Morrison Security." The name hit me like a slap. Morrison? Harold Morrison's brother owns the company. They do security systems, fire alarm installations, safety inspections for commercial properties. Louise's voice was barely above a whisper. "My husband, he's a good man. But he got involved in something. I don't know exactly what. Money problems, gambling debts. Morrison offered to help, and then suddenly we weren't in debt anymore. But my husband started coming home late, stressed, not himself. What does this have to do with the fire? 2 nights ago, he came home and he'd been drinking. He never drinks. He was crying, saying he was sorry, that he didn't know it would go this far." Louise's eyes filled with tears. "He said Morrison had asked him to do something terrible, that there was a firefighter who'd found something he shouldn't have, and they needed to handle it. He said someone was going to get hurt." My chest tightened. "Did he tell you Vincent's name?" "No. But the next morning, I heard him on the phone with someone, giving them an address. Vincent's address. And then he said something about making sure the family was out first, that Morrison didn't want casualties, just needed to destroy evidence. So you warned me. I couldn't let them hurt you. I couldn't let children." Her voice broke. "But I can't go to the police. If I do, my husband goes to prison. If Morrison finds out I warned you, I don't know what he'll do to us." I understood then the terrible position she was in, the impossible choice she'd made. "Louise, Vincent is investigating corruption in the fire department. He found evidence that Morrison has been manipulating fire investigations. If you know anything else—" "I don't. I swear. I just know my husband is involved somehow, and Morrison is behind it. And they're dangerous." She looked at me with desperate eyes. "Please, you have to protect your son. These people, they don't stop. If Vincent keeps investigating, they'll do worse than burn his house." A car engine started somewhere down the street. Louise flinched. "I have to go back inside," she said. "My husband can't know I talked to you." "One more thing," I said quickly. "Morrison Security. What kinds of properties do they service?" "Commercial buildings mostly. Restaurants, warehouses, Some apartment complexes. She paused at the door. And the fire station. The door closed, and I stood on that porch feeling the pieces shift and align in my mind. Morrison Security installing fire alarms and safety systems at the very properties that later burned. Harold Morrison's brother's company. A perfect closed loop of corruption and profit. I drove back to my house thinking about evidence and proof, and how to protect a son who wouldn't want to be protected. Vincent was awake when I returned, sitting at my kitchen table with coffee and his laptop, already working. "Where were you?" he asked. "Errands." Another lie. They were piling up. "What are you doing?" "Trying to figure out what I have left." He rubbed his face. "Mom, everything was in that safe. Years of documentation. Fire reports, insurance claims, internal memos. All of it gone. Did you have copies anywhere else?" "Some older stuff on a cloud drive. But most of the recent evidence was only on paper. Captain Morrison insisted we keep the investigation offline for security reasons." He laughed bitterly. "Now I know why." Caroline appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas. "Vincent, maybe you should let this go. Maybe it's a sign." "A sign?" He looked at his wife incredulously. "Someone burned down our house, Caroline. The police said it was suspicious, not definitely arson. Maybe it was electrical, maybe it wasn't electrical." Vincent's voice was hard. "You know it wasn't. I know you're obsessed with this investigation, and now we've lost everything." Caroline's voice rose. "We have no home, no clothes, no furniture. Emma's school project was in there, Tyler's baby photos. Everything, Vincent. And for what? So you can prove your boss is corrupt? So I can do my job. So I can make sure people aren't dying in fires that were set deliberately and covered up. That's not your job. Your job is to fight fires, not play detective." I set my coffee down carefully. "Caroline, I think Vincent is right to be concerned." She turned on me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in my daughter-in-law's eyes. Anger, yes, but also fear. Raw, genuine fear. "With respect, Chrissy, this isn't your business. This is our family, our crisis. Maybe if Vincent had listened to me months ago and dropped this investigation, we'd still have a home. Or maybe you'd all be dead," I said quietly. The room went silent. Tyler appeared in the doorway behind his mother, his young face confused and worried. "Are we going to be okay?" he asked in a small voice. Vincent pulled his son into a hug. "We're going to be fine, buddy. We just need to figure some things out." But I could see in my son's eyes that he didn't know if that was true. The police called that afternoon. Detective Sarah Walsh, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She wanted to interview Vincent again, this time at the station. I insisted on coming with him. "Mrs. Brennan, I appreciate your concern, but your son is an adult," Detective Walsh said when we arrived. "My son is being targeted," I replied. "I'm here as a witness and support. Unless there's a legal reason I can't be present." She studied me for a moment, then shrugged. "Suit yourself." The interview room was gray and cold. Detective Walsh laid out photographs of the fire scene, close-ups of the back door that had been forced, the garage where accelerant patterns were visible even in the debris. "This was definitely arson," she said. "Professional job, too. They knew what they were doing. Mr. Brennan, is there anyone who would want to harm you or your family?" Vincent glanced at me. I could see him weighing his options, deciding how much to reveal. "I've been conducting an internal investigation at the fire department," he said finally. "Looking into some irregularities in fire reports." "What kind of irregularities?" "Fires that should have been ruled arson but weren't. Insurance investigations that were shut down. A pattern of suspicious activity." Detective Walsh's pen stopped moving. "Who asked you to conduct this investigation?" "Captain Harold Morrison." "And does Captain Morrison know you found something incriminating?" "I reported my findings to him, yes." "When?" 3 days ago." The detective sat back, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Brennan, I need you to understand something. Captain Harold Morrison is a decorated firefighter with 30 years of service to this community. He's received commendations from the mayor, the police chief, the governor. What you're suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Vincent interrupted. "I'm stating facts. I found evidence of corruption. I reported it to my superior, and 2 days later, my house was burned down with clear intent to destroy evidence I'd collected. What evidence? It was in a safe in my garage. It's gone now. How convenient. I leaned forward. Detective Walsh, are you suggesting my son burned down his own house? I'm suggesting that accusations against a man like Captain Morrison require more than circumstantial evidence and convenient timing. Convenient? Vincent's voice rose. I lost everything. You also gained a convenient excuse for why you can't produce proof of your accusations. Detective Walsh closed her notebook. Mr. Brennan, I'll be honest with you. Without evidence, this looks like either a personal vendetta or a man trying to cover up his own mistakes by blaming his superior. You're not going to investigate Morrison? I'm going to investigate the arson. If evidence leads to Captain Morrison, I'll follow it. But right now, you're asking me to take your word that a decorated public servant is a criminal based on documents you conveniently can't produce. She stood. If you have anything concrete, bring it to me. Until then, I suggest you let the professionals handle this. We left the station in silence. Vincent's hands were shaking when we reached my truck. She's right, he said. Without evidence, I have nothing. It's my word against Morrison's, and his word carries weight in this town. Then we get new evidence, I said. Mom, there is no evidence. It burned. We start over. We find what you found before. We document it better. We build an airtight case. They'll be watching now. Morrison knows I'm onto him. He'll be careful. Then we'll be more careful. I started the engine. Vincent, I didn't raise you to give up when things got hard. You didn't raise me to put my family in danger either. That struck home. I had no answer for it. We drove back to my house to find Caroline packing suitcases. She looked up when we entered, her face set and determined. We're going to my mother's, she announced. In Seattle. The kids need stability, and we need space to figure out what comes next. Caroline, Vincent began. No, I've made up my mind. My mother has room, and the kids can enroll in school there until we find a new place here. Or maybe we don't come back. Maybe we start over somewhere Morrison can't reach us. Running won't solve anything. Staying here nearly got us killed. I watched my son's marriage crack open right there in my living room. Stress and fear driving a wedge between two people who'd loved each other for 12 years. And I knew with cold certainty that this was exactly what Morrison wanted. Divide the family, isolate Vincent, make him weak and vulnerable. Caroline, I said carefully, if you go to Seattle, take the children, but let Vincent stay here with me. Let him finish what he started. So he can get himself killed? So you can both get hurt? So he can do what's right? Caroline looked at me with something like hatred. What's right? Chrissy, wake up. Right doesn't matter when you're dead. Right doesn't matter when your children are orphans. She finished packing and loaded the kids into her sedan within the hour. Vincent stood in my driveway watching his family leave, and I saw him age 10 years in that moment. Maybe she's right, he said when the taillights disappeared. Maybe I should let this go. Is that what your father would have done? He looked at me sharply. Thomas had died fighting a warehouse fire, a fire that had been ruled accidental despite evidence of faulty wiring that the owner had ignored. My husband had died doing his job, protecting others. Dad's dead because of corruption too, isn't he? Vincent said slowly. That warehouse fire. The inspection that passed a building that should have been condemned. I'd never said it out loud, but I'd always known. Always suspected. Yes, I said simply. Vincent's jaw tightened. Then I'm not letting this go. Good. Because I have a plan. What kind of plan? I smiled, feeling something fierce and old wake up inside me. The kind that requires a 63-year-old woman nobody pays attention to. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Stop asking questions. This is your only warning. I showed it to Vincent. His face went white. Mom, maybe Caroline was right. Maybe you should stay out of this. Too late, I said, and meant it. Somewhere across town, Captain Harold Morrison was making his own plans, and Louise Feldman's husband was probably reporting that his neighbor had visited his wife that morning. The game was escalating, and I'd just put myself directly in the crosshairs. But as I looked at my son, saw the determination returning to his eyes, I knew I'd made the right choice, even if it might be the last choice I ever made. Thanksgiving morning dawned gray and cold. Vincent was already awake when I came downstairs, sitting at my kitchen table surrounded by papers he'd printed from his cloud storage. His eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "I've been going through everything I still have access to," he said without preamble. "Old fire reports from 3 years ago before Morrison told me to take the investigation offline. Mom, look at this." He spread out 3 incident reports, each from different dates, different locations. A restaurant fire on Maple Street, a warehouse blaze on the industrial east side, an apartment building on Riverside Drive. "What am I looking at?" I asked, pouring coffee. The commonalities. Each property had recently failed a fire safety inspection. Each one had Morrison Security hired to upgrade their systems. Each one burned within 6 months of the upgrades. And each fire was ruled accidental despite evidence of accelerants. I studied the reports, seeing the pattern emerge. They were setting fires to buildings they'd already compromised, or making sure buildings burned that were going to burn anyway, then collecting insurance money and kickbacks from the security installations. Vincent tapped the warehouse report. "This one?" The owner declared bankruptcy 2 months before the fire. He was about to lose everything. Then his building burns. Insurance pays out. Suddenly he's solvent again and opening a new business across town. "Did you talk to any of these people?" I tried. Most wouldn't talk to me. One, the restaurant owner, he said he was just grateful he had good insurance and that Morrison Security had installed top-of-the-line equipment. When I pressed him about the fire starting in the kitchen despite the new suppression system, he got defensive and asked me to leave. He was afraid. Or complicit. Vincent pulled out another paper. "But there's one person who might talk. This apartment fire on Riverside Drive? 3 people died, Mom. An elderly couple and a disabled veteran. The owner of the building settled lawsuits with the families, but there was a tenant who survived and tried to file a complaint about the fire investigation. She claimed the fire department never properly examined the scene, that they ruled it accidental within hours." "What's her name?" "Patricia Reeves. She still lives in Cedar Falls, works at the library downtown." I checked my watch. "The library's closed for Thanksgiving. It opens tomorrow." Then tomorrow we talked to her. I sat down across from my son. "Vincent, we need to be smart about this. Morrison knows you're investigating. He'll be watching you. That's why you should go alone." "Absolutely not." "Mom, you got a threatening text. These people have already shown they're willing to commit arson, to destroy property, maybe even to kill. I can't let you can't stop me." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "I'm not a child, and I'm not fragile. I'm a woman who's lived through things you can't imagine, and I'm choosing to help my son. That's the end of the discussion." Vincent looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw him see something he'd perhaps forgotten. That his mother was more than just a sweet old woman who baked cookies, that I'd raised 3 children alone after his father died, that I'd held our family together through grief and financial hardship, and all the small daily battles that life brings. "Okay," he said finally. "We do this together." We spent the rest of Thanksgiving Day planning. No turkey, no stuffing, no pumpkin pie. Just 2 people hunched over documents, building a strategy, preparing for war. I called Caroline that evening to check on the kids. She was cold, distant. "They're fine. They're with my mother. I miss them." Maybe you should have thought of that before encouraging Vincent to keep investigating. "Caroline, this isn't about—" "I know exactly what it's about, Chrissy. It's about you never being able to let go. You lost Thomas and you've spent 5 years being angry about it, and now you're projecting that onto Vincent, making him think he needs to avenge his father by going after Morrison." The accusation stung because it held a grain of truth. I had been angry about Thomas's death. I still was. "This is about protecting our family," I said quietly. "No, it's about revenge. And it's going to get someone killed." She hung up before I could respond. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Caroline's words, about whether she was right. Was I putting Vincent in danger because of my own unresolved grief? Was I using my son to fight a battle I'd been too afraid to fight alone? At 2 in the morning, I got up and went to my study, a small room off the living room where I kept Thomas's things. His firefighter helmet on the shelf, his commendations on the wall, photographs of him in his uniform. I pulled out the file I'd kept from his death investigation, the one I'd read so many times I had it memorized. The warehouse fire that killed him had been ruled accidental. Faulty wiring, the report said. But the warehouse had passed inspection just 3 months before. The same inspector who'd signed off on it had signed off on the restaurant fire Vincent had shown me, and the apartment building where 3 people died. Inspector Gerald Hammond, Morrison's brother-in-law. I'd known, on some level. I'd always known. But I'd never done anything about it because I had 3 children to raise and bills to pay and a mountain of grief to climb. I'd told myself that pursuing the truth wouldn't bring Thomas back, that it would only cause more pain. But now they'd come for Vincent. Now they'd threatened my grandchildren. And Caroline was right about one thing. I was angry. I was furious. The next morning, Vincent and I drove to the Cedar Falls Public Library. It was a beautiful building, all glass and wood, built with a bond measure 5 years ago. Patricia Reeves worked at the reference desk, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a bun. "Ms. Reeves?" Vincent approached her with his badge visible. "I'm Vincent Brennan with the Cedar Falls Fire Department. Could I speak with you privately about the Riverside Drive apartment fire?" Her expression immediately closed. "I already gave my statement. Years ago. I have nothing more to say. Please," I said, stepping forward. "My son is investigating corruption in the department. We think the fire that killed your neighbors wasn't properly investigated. We think it might have been deliberate." Patricia looked at me, then at Vincent, her eyes searching. "Who sent you?" "No one sent us," Vincent said. "I'm doing this on my own because I found evidence of—" "Don't." She held up a hand, glanced around the library. "Not here. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks north. Meet me there in 15 minutes. Come alone." "Both of us," I insisted. She studied me again, then nodded. "Both of you." The coffee shop was nearly empty, just a few college students with laptops and a businessman reading a newspaper. Patricia was already at a corner table when we arrived. She didn't order anything, just sat with her hands wrapped around an empty mug. "The fire department never properly investigated that building," she said without preamble. "I was home that night. I smelled gasoline in the hallway hours before the fire started. I called the non-emergency line and they said they'd send someone, but no one came. Then at 3 in the morning, the fire alarm went off. Except it didn't work right. It was just this weak little beep, not nearly loud enough. By the time I got out, the stairwell was already engulfed." "You told the investigators this?" Vincent asked. "I told everyone. The fire department, the police, the insurance investigators. They all said I was mistaken, that trauma can cause people to remember things wrong. But I know what I smelled. I know that alarm system was faulty." Her voice shook. "The Hendersons died because they couldn't get out. Mr. Martinez was in a wheelchair. He never had a chance." "The fire alarm system," I said. "Who installed it?" "Morrison Security. They'd just upgraded the whole building 2 months before." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "The owner, he said Morrison gave him a good deal, that the equipment was top quality. After the fire, Morrison's brother, the captain, he came to the memorial service. He gave this speech about how tragic it was, how sometimes old buildings just can't be saved. But that building wasn't old. It was only 20 years old, and it had been renovated." Vincent was taking notes. "Did you keep any documentation? Receipts, photos, anything?" "I kept everything. I have a storage unit full of papers because I knew someday someone would listen." She pulled out her phone, scrolled through photos. "I even took pictures of the alarm system after the fire. Look." She showed us an image of a melted fire alarm panel, the wiring clearly visible. Vincent's face went pale. "That's been tampered with," he said. "Those wires aren't just melted, they've been cut. Before the fire." That's what I thought. But when I showed these to the fire marshal, he said I didn't know what I was looking at, that I should leave the investigation to professionals. "Who was the fire marshal on that case?" I asked, though I already knew. "Captain Harold Morrison." There it was, the direct connection. Morrison investigating fires in buildings where his brother's company had installed faulty equipment. Morrison ruling fires accidental when they were clearly arson. A perfect closed loop of corruption that had been running for years. Ms. Reeves, Vincent said carefully, would you be willing to testify about this? To go on record? She was quiet for a long moment. I tried once. I went to the police, to the city council, to the mayor's office. No one would listen. Morrison has too much power in this town. His brother's company employs half the security workers in the county. His campaign contributions go to every elected official. He's untouchable. Not if we can prove it, I said. You can't prove it. That's the point. Anyone who tries gets shut down or threatened or worse. She looked at Vincent intently. I heard about your house fire. I work at a library. We hear things. People talk. They're saying you accused Captain Morrison of corruption, and then your house mysteriously burned down. They're saying you're a disgruntled employee trying to cause trouble. Who's saying that? Everyone. It was in the local paper this morning, an anonymous editorial defending Morrison and questioning your motives. Vincent pulled out his phone, searched for the Cedar Falls Chronicle online edition. There it was, a scathing opinion piece titled, Baseless Accusations Against a Local Hero. It didn't name Vincent directly, but it was clear who it was about. A veteran firefighter with a grudge, it said. A man who'd manufactured evidence and then destroyed it himself to cover his tracks. Morrison's controlling the narrative, I said. He always does. Patricia stood. I'm sorry. I want to help, but I have children. I can't risk becoming a target again. I've rebuilt my life. I can't lose everything a second time. She left before we could argue. Vincent and I sat in that coffee shop, the weight of failure pressing down on us. Every lead seemed to close before we could grasp it. Every witness was too afraid to talk. Morrison had spent years building his empire, protecting it with fear and influence and strategic alliances. We need something he can't control, Vincent said finally. Something he doesn't know exists. Like what? I don't know. But there has to be something. Some record, some witness. Some piece of evidence he missed. My phone rang. An unknown number. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Brennan? A man's voice, unfamiliar. This is James Feldman, Louisa's husband. My heart stopped. Mr. Feldman, I understand you spoke to my wife. I need to meet with you. Alone. Today. I don't think... Please. I have information about Captain Morrison. Information that can help your son. But I won't talk with him there. Just you. There's a park on Willow Street, the one with the covered picnic area. 1 hour. Why should I trust you? Because I'm the one who poured the accelerant in your son's house, he said quietly. And I'm ready to make things right. The line went dead. I looked at Vincent, my hands shaking. James Feldman wants to meet. He says he has information. It's a trap. Maybe, or maybe it's our only chance. I'm coming with you, he said alone. Mom, absolutely not. This man admitted to committing arson. He could be working for Morrison, trying to lure you somewhere isolated. Then what choice do we have? If we don't go, we lose the only witness who can directly connect Morrison to the fires. Vincent ran his hands through his hair, the stress etched in every line of his face. I'll follow you. Stay hidden. If anything goes wrong, you call the police and you save yourself. I stood, grabbed my purse. I'm not losing you the way I lost your father. Mom? That's not negotiable. The park on Willow Street was deserted, the playground equipment empty, the covered picnic area dark and cold. James Feldman stood near the shelter, a thin man in his 40s with haunted eyes and shaking hands. I approached slowly, aware that Vincent was somewhere in the parking lot, watching. Mrs. Brennan, James said. Thank you for coming. Tell me what you know. Morrison has been running this operation for 8 years. My company installs fire safety equipment that's designed to fail. Faulty wiring, disabled alarms, compromised suppression systems. Then Morrison's people set the fires, he investigates and rules them accidental. The buildings collect insurance money, and we all get paid. How many fires? Dozens. Maybe more. I don't know about all of them. His voice broke. I never meant for it to go this far. I had gambling debts. Morrison offered to help, and then I was in too deep to get out. Why tell me this now? Because you got your family out. Because when I poured that accelerant, I thought about your grandchildren sleeping in their beds, and I realized I'd become a monster. Tears ran down his face. I have daughters, Mrs. Brennan. Little girls who think their father is a good man. I can't be this person anymore. Will you testify? I'll do more than that. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. I've been keeping records. Every building, every fire, every payment. Morrison thought I was too scared to ever betray him. But I was just waiting for the right moment. I reached for the flash drive, and that's when I heard the footsteps behind me. I'm afraid I can't let you give that to her, James. I turned to see Captain Harold Morrison standing 10 feet away, and he was holding a gun. Captain Morrison, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the terror flooding my veins. I didn't know you were joining us. James here called me right after he called you, Morrison said, his voice calm, almost pleasant. Did you really think I'd let him betray me after 8 years? That I wouldn't have insurance against his sudden attack of conscience? James Feldman's face had gone white. Harold, please. I just want out. Let me give her the drive and we can all walk away. Walk away? Morrison laughed, a cold sound that echoed across the empty park. James, you really are stupid. The moment that drive changes hands, we're all finished. You, me, your brother, everyone in the chain. Did you think I'd let that happen? I was calculating distances, angles, trying to see where Vincent was. The parking lot was 50 yards away, too far for him to reach us before Morrison could pull the trigger. My phone was in my purse, but any movement would draw attention. What do you want? I asked. The drive, obviously. Morrison kept the gun trained on James, not me. Hand it over, James. Now. I can't, James said, and there was something almost relieved in his voice, as if he'd been carrying a weight for so long that putting it down felt good, even if it meant dying. I won't. Not anymore. Then I'll take it from your corpse. You won't shoot me here, James said. Too public. Too many witnesses. You're not that stupid, Harold. You'd be surprised what I'm willing to do to protect what I've built. Morrison's finger moved to the trigger. Last chance. A voice called out from the parking lot. Police! Drop your weapon! Morrison's head snapped around, and in that split second of distraction, James threw the flash drive to me. I caught it instinctively, fumbled it into my coat pocket just as Morrison turned back, his face contorted with rage. But there were no police. It was Vincent's voice, shouting from behind a car, the oldest trick in the book, and it had worked just long enough. Morrison's gun swung toward the parking lot, toward my son, and I did the only thing I could think of. I charged him. At 63, I wasn't fast or strong, but I had surprise and desperation on my side. I hit Morrison's arm just as he fired, the shot going wild, the recoil throwing me back. I hit the ground hard, pain exploding through my shoulder. James tackled Morrison from the other side, both men crashing to the pavement. The gun skittered across the concrete. Vincent was running now, sprinting across the grass, his phone to his ear calling real police. Morrison fought like a man with everything to lose. He got his knee into James's stomach, threw him off, scrambled for the gun. But Vincent reached it first, kicking it away, putting himself between Morrison and the weapon. It's over, Vincent said, breathing hard. The police are coming. I have witnesses. You're finished. Morrison stood slowly, brushing off his uniform. His face was eerily calm now, calculating. Am I? You have nothing, Brennan. An illegal recording device? A flash drive that could have been manufactured by anyone? All you have is the word of a known criminal. He gestured to James. And an old woman who attacked a decorated fire captain. You shot at us, I said, struggling to my feet. My shoulders screamed in protest. I shot at an armed assailant who was threatening me and a civilian. Morrison smiled. That's what my report will say. That James Feldman called me here claiming he had evidence against a corrupt firefighter, that you and your son showed up and became violent, that I defended myself in the line of duty. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. My body camera caught everything, Vincent said. You're not on duty. You're not authorized to wear department equipment for personal business. Any footage you have is inadmissible. Morrison straightened his jacket. You have no idea how deep this goes, do you? How many people are invested in keeping things exactly as they are? judges, lawyers, city officials. You think you're fighting one corrupt fire captain, but you're fighting an entire system. The police cars pulled into the parking lot, 4 of them, lights flashing. Detective Walsh emerged from the first one, her face grim. Morrison walked toward her, his hands visible, his posture that of a public servant who'd just survived an attack. Detective Walsh, thank goodness you're here. These people ambushed me. That's a lie, James said, but his voice was weak, defeated. He knew how this would play out. I watched Detective Walsh take in the scene. Morrison in uniform, calm and authoritative. James Feldman, known employee of Morrison Security with documented financial problems. Vincent, who'd already been accused of making baseless accusations. And me, an old woman who'd just physically attacked a police officer's colleague. Captain Morrison, Walsh said carefully, I'm going to need statements from everyone. Perhaps you'd be willing to come to the station? Of course. Whatever I can do to help. Morrison shot me a look of pure triumph. I just hope these people get the mental health support they clearly need. The implication was clear. We were unstable, delusional, dangerous. By the time Morrison was done with his statement, by the time his lawyers were involved and his allies in the system had circled the wagons, we'd be lucky if we weren't charged with assault. An ambulance arrived for me, though I insisted I was fine. My shoulder was bruised but not broken. The EMT was kind, middle-aged, professional. As he examined me, he spoke quietly. I knew your husband, he said. Thomas Brennan. Good man. That warehouse fire that killed him, it never sat right with me. I looked at him sharply. What do you mean? I was one of the first responders. The way that building went up, it was too fast, too hot, like it had been prepped. He finished wrapping my shoulder, his voice barely audible. But the report said accidental, so who was I to argue? I'm just an EMT. What's your name? Robert Miller. Robert, would you be willing to testify about what you saw? He was quiet for a long moment. I have a family. A pension coming up in 3 years. I can't afford to make enemies. None of us can, I said. But we do it anyway. He closed his medical bag, met my eyes. If you get subpoena power, if there's a real investigation with real protection for witnesses, call me. But not before then. I'm sorry. He left, and I sat in the back of the ambulance watching the police interview Vincent, James, Morrison. Watching the machine of corruption do what it did best. Protect itself. Vincent came to find me an hour later, his face haggard. They're not arresting Morrison, he said. Walsh says there's insufficient evidence. James's testimony is tainted because he's an admitted arsonist. The flash drive could contain anything or nothing. Without independent corroboration, it's just one criminal's word against a decorated officer. What about the recording of Morrison admitting to the corruption? I wasn't wearing a wire. My phone was in my pocket. The audio is muffled. Could be argued that it's been doctored. Vincent sat beside me heavily. Mom, I think we lost. We have the flash drive, which Morrison's lawyers will argue was fabricated. Without James willing to authenticate it under oath, without additional witnesses, it's just data on a drive. He looked at his hands. Detective Walsh told me to drop it. Off the record, she said if I keep pushing, Morrison will file charges against all of us. Assault, harassment, making false statements to police. She said he has the mayor's office behind him, the police chief, half the city council. She's trying to scare us. She's trying to save us. Mom, I could lose my job. You could be prosecuted. James is definitely going to jail for the arson regardless of what happens with Morrison. And Caroline, his voice broke, Caroline called. She's filing for separation. She said she can't be married to someone who's willing to sacrifice his family for a crusade. I pulled my son against me, felt him shake with grief and exhaustion. Everything was falling apart. Morrison had won by doing exactly what powerful, corrupt men always do, making the cost of truth higher than anyone could afford to pay. But as I held Vincent, feeling the flash drive in my pocket pressing against my ribs, I thought about something Morrison had said. You think you're fighting one corrupt fire captain, but you're fighting an entire system. He'd meant it as a threat, a demonstration of how outmatched we were. But systems have weaknesses, cracks. Points of pressure where everything can come apart if you push in exactly the right place. Vincent, I said slowly. The flash drive. What exactly is on it? I don't know. We haven't had a chance to look at it. Let's go home. Let's see what James was willing to risk his life to give us. We drove back to my farmhouse in silence. Detective Walsh had let us go with a warning about staying away from Morrison. James Feldman was in custody, facing arson charges. Morrison was free, probably already celebrating his victory. Inside my house, Vincent plugged the flash drive into his laptop. I made coffee, my hands still shaking from adrenaline. When I returned to the table, Vincent's face had gone pale. "Mom," he whispered, "this isn't just fire reports. This is financial records. Bank transfers, shell companies, offshore accounts. James documented everything. Where the money came from, where it went, who got paid. There are names here, dozens of them. City inspectors, insurance adjusters, building owners, lawyers. How much money are we talking about? Millions. Over 8 years, at least $5 million moving through these accounts." Vincent scrolled through files, his hands shaking. "And look at this. There's a spreadsheet. Every fire Morrison's been involved with for the past decade, cross-referenced with insurance payouts and security installations. It's a complete record of the entire operation. Can we use it? If we can authenticate it, if we can prove it's genuine, if we can protect it from being suppressed." He looked at me. "Mom, this is enough to bring down half the city government. No wonder Morrison was willing to kill for it." My phone rang. Another unknown number. I was beginning to dread that sound. "Mrs. Brennan," a woman's voice, cultured and cold. "My name is Victoria Ashford. I'm an attorney representing Captain Harold Morrison. I'm calling to inform you that my client will be filing a restraining order against you and your son, effective immediately. You are to cease all contact with him, cease all investigation into his professional conduct, and cease making defamatory statements about his character." "We have evidence," I said. "Do you? Because my understanding is that you have a flash drive of questionable provenance from a man currently in custody for arson. A man who, I should mention, has just agreed to testify that you and your son pressured him into fabricating evidence against Captain Morrison." My blood ran cold. "That's a lie." "Is it? James Feldman is facing 20 years in prison for arson. But if he cooperates with the investigation into your conduct, if he testifies that you orchestrated this entire conspiracy to defame an innocent man, well, prosecutors might be inclined toward leniency. They threatened him. They offered him a deal. That's how the justice system works, Mrs. Brennan." Victoria Ashford's voice was smooth as silk. "Now, I'm going to make you an offer. A one-time offer. Drop this investigation. Return the flash drive to my office. Sign a non-disclosure agreement, and my client will agree not to press charges against you or your son. And if we refuse, then tomorrow morning I'll be filing criminal complaints against both of you for assault, harassment, conspiracy to manufacture evidence, and defamation. Your son will lose his job and his pension. You'll lose your home-paying legal fees. And your daughter-in-law will testify in the custody hearing about how your mental instability has endangered her children." I felt the walls closing in. "You've already talked to Caroline. I've talked to many people. I'm very good at my job, Mrs. Brennan. And my job is to protect my client by any means necessary." A pause. "You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to make your decision. Choose wisely." She hung up. Vincent had heard enough to understand. They're going after Caroline. They're threatening custody of my kids. They're doing what they always do. Finding the pressure point and pushing until something breaks. Maybe we should take the deal. Maybe... No. I stood, my shoulder aching, my head throbbing, but my mind suddenly, perfectly clear. No more surrender. No more backing down. Morrison made a mistake. What mistake? He gave us until 9 a.m. tomorrow. I smiled, feeling something fierce and cold settle into my chest. That means he's afraid of what we might do tonight. That means this flash drive is even more dangerous than he's letting on. And that means we have one night to make sure it sees the light of day. How? If we go to the police, Morrison's lawyers will suppress it. If we go to the media, they'll call it fake. If we go to the FBI, It'll take months to investigate, and Morrison will have time to cover his tracks. I thought about it, turning the problem over in my mind. Then I smiled. We don't go to any of them, I said. We go to everyone. All at once. Before Morrison can stop us. I don't understand. Vincent, do you remember your friend from the Fire Academy? The one who became a journalist? Marcus Webb. He works for the regional newspaper now. Call him. Tell him we have a story. The biggest story of his career. Then call every journalist, every blogger, every news outlet within 100 miles. We make copies of the flash drive, we send it everywhere simultaneously, and we go public before Morrison can silence us. That's not how journalism works. They'll need time to verify. Then we give them enough verified truth that they can't ignore it. We give them Patricia Reeves and her photographs. We give them Robert Miller's testimony about my husband's death. We give them a story so big that even Morrison's connections can't suppress it. And if it doesn't work? If they still come after us? Then at least we tried. At least we didn't go quietly. I took my son's hands. Vincent, I'm an old woman. I've had my life. But you have children. A future. If you want to take Morrison's deal, I'll understand. I'll fight this alone. No, he said firmly. We do this together. Win or lose. We worked through the night, making copies, drafting statements, contacting every media outlet we could find. Marcus Webb agreed to meet us at 6 a.m. off the record to hear what we had. Other journalists were skeptical but curious. At 5:30 in the morning, as gray dawn broke over Cedar Falls, my doorbell rang. Detective Walsh stood on my porch, her face grim. I'm here to arrest your son, she said. Captain Morrison filed assault charges an hour ago, and I've been ordered by the chief and the DA to act on the warrant. A judge already signed it. But you said... I said a lot of things. I was wrong. She looked past me to Vincent. I'm sorry, son. I have to take you in. Vincent stood, his face pale, but resolved. It's okay, Mom. We knew this might happen. No, I said. You're not taking him anywhere. Mrs. Brennan, please don't make this harder. Call Marcus Webb at the regional paper. Ask him what story he's running in this morning's edition. Detective Walsh frowned. What are you talking about? We went public 3 hours ago. Sent the evidence to every news outlet in the state. Gave them enough verified information to run preliminary stories. By 9 a.m., Captain Morrison's corruption will be front-page news across Oregon. I smiled. You can arrest my son if you want, Detective. But the truth is already out there. Morrison can't stop it now. Walsh pulled out her phone, made a call. I watched her face change as whoever she spoke to confirmed what I'd said. She hung up slowly. You've just declared war on one of the most powerful men in this city, she said. No, I replied. I just finished one. But I was wrong. The war was far from over. It was just beginning. By 8 a.m., my farmhouse had become command central for what the media was already calling the Cedar Falls fire scandal. Marcus Webb and 3 other journalists were camped in my living room, verifying documents, making calls, preparing follow-up stories. Vincent's arrest warrant had been mysteriously delayed. Detective Walsh had made one phone call, and suddenly there were procedural issues that needed to be resolved. The morning news was leading with our story. Grainy copies of the financial records scrolled across screens while anchors discussed corruption, cover-ups, and questions about how deep the scandal went. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Caroline had called twice, frantic and furious, demanding to know what we'd done. I hadn't called her back. Mrs. Brennan, Marcus Webb said, looking up from his laptop. I just got confirmation from our legal team. Everything on this flash drive is authentic. Bank records, wire transfers, shell companies. It's all real, and it's all admissible. How can you be sure? Vincent asked. Because James Feldman wasn't the only one keeping records. Marcus pulled up an email. I just heard from an accountant at First National Bank. She's been watching these transactions for years, flagging them as suspicious to her superiors. They told her to mind her own business, but she kept copies, private copies, and her records matched James's exactly. Why didn't she come forward before? I asked. Same reason no one did? Fear. But now that the story's public, now that she has cover, she's willing to testify. Marcus stood, pacing with nervous energy. Mrs. Brennan, this is bigger than Morrison. The records show payments to city councilors, to the building commission, to insurance investigators. This is systemic corruption going back a decade. My doorbell rang again. Through the window, I saw a news van from Portland, then another from Eugene. The media was descending like locusts, and I knew that every minute they spent on my lawn was another minute Morrison couldn't control the narrative. Detective Walsh called at 8:30. Mrs. Brennan, Captain Morrison wants to meet with you. Neutral location, just the two of you. He says he has information you need to hear. Why would I agree to that? Because the alternative is a legal battle that will destroy both of you. Because there might be a way to resolve this that doesn't end in scorched earth. She paused. Because he claims he has evidence that will change everything you think you know. I looked at Vincent, who was shaking his head. It's a trap, he mouthed. Maybe it was. But I was tired of running, tired of reacting. It was time to take control. Where and when? I asked. Cedar Falls City Hall. Conference Room B, 10 a.m. He's requested that your son not be present. I'll bring my lawyer. You don't have a lawyer. I will by 10 a.m. I hung up and turned to Marcus Webb. I need the name of the toughest attorney in Cedar Falls. Someone who isn't afraid of Morrison. Marcus didn't hesitate. Sarah Kincaid. She's a former prosecutor who went into private practice. Took on the mayor's office last year over a zoning scandal and won. She doesn't lose. Call her. Tell her I need her at City Hall in 90 minutes. Vincent grabbed my arm. Mom, you can't meet with Morrison. He's desperate. He could what? Kill me in City Hall with witnesses everywhere? No. This is about control. He wants to make one last play, try to spin this somehow. I squeezed my son's hand. Trust me. I know what I'm doing. But I wasn't sure I did. Sarah Kincaid arrived at my house at 9:30, a tall woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed the flash drive contents in 10 minutes, asked sharp questions in another 5, and nodded once. All right, she said. Let's go see what Morrison wants. City Hall was chaos. Reporters lined the steps, cameras everywhere, officials rushing in and out looking harried. Sarah and I pushed through to Conference Room B, where Captain Harold Morrison waited with Victoria Ashford and 2 other lawyers I didn't recognize. Morrison looked like he hadn't slept. His uniform was crisp, but his eyes were bloodshot, and there was a tremor in his hands he couldn't quite hide. Mrs. Brennan, he said, thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries, Sarah Kincaid said, taking a seat across from him. My client has already gone public with evidence of your corruption. Anything you say now is on the record and will be used against you. So choose your words carefully. Morrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm not here to threaten anyone. I'm here to offer context. Context? I repeated. Yes. You see, you've gotten part of the story right. There was corruption in the fire department. There were payoffs, manipulated investigations, deliberate fires. But you've made one critical error. He leaned forward. You think I was in charge. You think I was running the operation? The financial records show money flowing through accounts I had access to, but they don't show who was actually giving the orders. Morrison pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. For 8 years, I've been collecting evidence against the person who was really running this operation. Someone with enough power to force me to participate, enough connections to protect themselves, enough ruthlessness to threaten my family if I didn't comply. I opened the folder. Inside were photographs, bank statements, recorded phone calls. And at the center of it all was a name I recognized but had never suspected. Mayor Richard Torres. That's impossible, I said. Is it? Look at the dates. Every major fire corresponds with a construction project that Torres supported. Every insurance payout benefited developers who contributed to his campaigns. Every building that burned was blocking development he wanted. Morrison's voice was bitter. Torres needed someone inside the fire department to make sure investigations went his way. He needed someone with Morrison security to make sure buildings burned at exactly the right time. He found my brother first, threatened to ruin him unless he cooperated. Then he came to me. Why should we believe you? Sarah asked. Because I'm giving you evidence that will end my career and probably send me to prison. Because I'm tired of being controlled by a man who's supposed to serve the public, but actually serves himself. Morrison looked at me directly. Your husband, Thomas Brennan. His death wasn't my fault. The warehouse he died in, Torres needed it gone. The owner wouldn't sell, so Torres had it burned, and your husband was the collateral damage. I tried to protect the investigation afterward, tried to find evidence that would prove it was arson, but Torres shut me down, made sure it was ruled accidental. Tears burned my eyes. You expect me to believe you tried to help? I expect you to believe that I'm a man who got trapped in something bigger than himself and made terrible choices to protect my family, just like James Feldman did, just like a dozen other people did. He pushed the folder closer. But now you've blown this open, and I have a choice. I can go down alone, or I can take Torres with me. Sarah was flipping through the documents, her expression unreadable. This evidence? Can you authenticate it? Every word. I have witnesses who will testify. City employees who were pressured by Torres, developers who paid him off, building inspectors who were told to look the other way. Morrison's jaw tightened. I've been gathering evidence for 3 years, waiting for the right moment. You just gave me that moment. I sat back, my mind reeling. Was this real? Or was it another manipulation, another layer of lies designed to protect Morrison by sacrificing someone else? Why didn't you come forward before? I asked. Because Torres is the mayor. Because he controls the police chief, half the city council, the district attorney. Because anyone who challenges him gets destroyed professionally, financially, sometimes physically. Morrison's hands clenched into fists. But now the story's public. Now there's scrutiny. Now I have a chance to make this right. By claiming you were just following orders. By admitting I was complicit but showing you who was really responsible. He stood. Mrs. Brennan, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for truth. Real truth. Not the partial story you published this morning. If you want justice for your husband, if you want to protect your son from retaliation, if you want to make sure this never happens again, you need to go after Torres. Victoria Ashford opened her briefcase, pulled out another folder. We're prepared to offer full cooperation in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Captain Morrison will testify against Mayor Torres and everyone else involved in the operation. He'll provide documentation, recordings, witness names, everything you need to build an airtight case. Sarah Kincaid looked at me. It's your call. I thought about Thomas, dying in a fire that never should have happened. I thought about Vincent, nearly losing everything for trying to do the right thing. I thought about all the people who'd suffered while powerful men protected their interests. I want to hear the recordings, I said. Morrison nodded to Victoria, who set up a laptop. The first recording started playing, and Mayor Richard Torres's voice filled the room. Harold, I need the Riverside apartment building dealt with. The developer is ready to buy the lot, but the tenants won't leave. We need a fire. Make it look accidental. 3 families live there, Richard, including children. Then make sure it happens at night when people can evacuate. I don't care how you do it. Just get it done. The city needs that development. The recording continued. Torres giving orders. Morrison arguing but eventually complying. The whole sordid conversation laid bare. There were others too. Dozens of recorded calls over 3 years. Torres orchestrating fires, demanding results, threatening Morrison when he pushed back. By the time the last recording finished, I felt sick. How did you record these without him knowing? I asked. I started wearing a wire after the first year. After I realized I was in too deep to get out alone. Morrison's voice was hollow. I thought someday I'd find a way to use them. I just never had the courage until now. Sarah Kincaid was making notes, her legal mind already building the case. We'll need to verify all of this independently. We'll need cooperation agreements in writing. And Mrs. Brennan's son needs full immunity as well. Agreed, Victoria said. And James Feldman, I added. He gets immunity too. He tried to do the right thing. That's up to the district attorney. Then make it part of the deal. Morrison testifies against Torres. Feldman testifies against Morrison, and both of them get immunity in exchange for bringing down the real criminal. I looked at Morrison directly. You want redemption? This is what it costs. You saved the man you tried to destroy. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Done. We spent the next 2 hours hammering out details, Sarah negotiating terms while I listened to more recordings, reviewed more documents, felt the full weight of the conspiracy crushing down. Torres had been running Cedar Falls like his personal fiefdom for years, and everyone had been too afraid or too complicit to stop him. But now he was exposed. Sarah's phone rang at noon. She answered, listened, and her face went pale. When? She asked. Where is he now? She hung up and looked at us. Mayor Torres just held a press conference. He's resigning effective immediately, citing health reasons, and he's already on a flight to Mexico City. He's running, I said. He's escaping. Mexico doesn't have an extradition treaty for white-collar crimes. Sarah cursed under her breath. By the time we can build a case strong enough to pursue him internationally, he'll have disappeared with millions in offshore accounts. Morrison stood abruptly. He can't get away with this. After everything he's done, everyone he's hurt, he already has, Victoria said quietly. It's over. But I was thinking about the recordings, about Torres's voice giving orders, threatening Morrison, about how arrogant, powerful men always made the same mistake. They assumed they were untouchable. Sarah, I said slowly, those recordings, are they admissible in criminal court? If we can prove they're authentic, yes. And if we can prove Torres knew he was being recorded and still gave criminal orders, that would show consciousness of guilt. It would be devastating evidence. She paused. But Morrison said Torres didn't know about the wire. Morrison said a lot of things. I looked at the captain. Tell me the truth. Did Torres know you were recording him? Morrison's face was unreadable. Then, slowly, he smiled. It was a terrible smile, full of bitter triumph. The last 6 months, yes. I told him I'd started keeping records for my own protection, that if anything happened to me or my family, the recordings would go public. He said he didn't care, that he owned enough people that the recordings could be buried or discredited and would never touch him. Morrison's smile widened. Turns out he was wrong. You set him up, I said. I documented his crimes while making sure he knew I was doing it. And he kept giving orders anyway because he couldn't imagine a world where he'd face consequences. Morrison sat down heavily. I've been waiting for someone brave enough to go public. Someone who could provide the catalyst for all of this to come out. Your son was that person. You were that person. All I had to do was wait for the right moment and then hand you everything you needed. Sarah was already on her phone. I'm calling the FBI and sending them copies of the flash drive and the recordings. If Torres is fleeing the country with knowledge that he's under investigation, that's grounds for immediate intervention. They can alert customs, ground his plane, bring him back. As she made the call, I looked at Morrison and saw him clearly for the first time. Not a simple villain, not a helpless victim, but a complicated man who'd made terrible choices and then spent years trying to find a way to unmake them. He'd manipulated James Feldman into helping with the fires, then manipulated me and Vincent into exposing the whole operation, then manipulated Torres into creating evidence of his own guilt. You used us, I said quietly. Yes. You burned my son's house. Yes. You could have come forward at any time. You could have stopped this years ago. I could have. And I didn't. I chose to protect myself and my family instead. Morrison met my eyes. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Mrs. Brennan. I'm just glad that finally, after all these years, something good came from something terrible. Sarah ended her call. FBI is on it. Torres's plane is being held in San Francisco. They'll have him in custody within the hour. Outside, sirens wailed as more law enforcement arrived. The story was growing by the minute, spreading beyond Cedar Falls to state and national news. The corruption scandal that had started with one firefighter's investigation was now bringing down an entire city government. Vincent called. Mom, are you okay? What's happening? Come to City Hall, I said, and bring Caroline. She needs to hear this. Caroline's on her way back from Seattle. She saw the news. Mom, I think we might have a chance to fix this. I hung up and walked to the window, looking out at the chaos. Police cars, news vans, crowds of people gathering to witness history. And somewhere in that crowd was my son, fighting his way toward me, toward truth, toward a future we'd almost lost. Morrison stood beside me. For what it's worth, I am sorry. About your husband, about your son's house, about all of it. Sorry doesn't bring Thomas back. No, it doesn't. He was quiet for a moment. But maybe it's enough to make sure no one else has to lose what you lost. Maybe. Or maybe it was just another comfortable lie we told ourselves so we could sleep at night. But as I watched Vincent emerge from the crowd, as I saw him push through to the building, determined and unbroken, I thought that maybe Morrison was right about one thing. Something good had come from something terrible. And sometimes, that was the most you could hope for. 3 weeks later, I stood in the driveway of a modest ranch house on Elm Street, watching a moving truck pull away. The house was smaller than Vincent's duplex had been, but it was solid, safe, and most importantly, it was theirs. Caroline emerged from the front door, paint smudges on her jeans, her hair tied back. She looked tired but lighter somehow, as if a weight she'd been carrying had finally lifted. "Chrissy," she said, and there was something different in her voice. Not warmth exactly, but not the cold anger either. "Thank you for coming." "Of course." I held up the casserole dish I'd brought. "I know you're still settling in, so I thought dinner might help." She took the dish, managed a small smile. "The kids will be thrilled. They've been asking for your cooking." We stood there awkwardly for a moment. The 3 weeks of distance between us like a chasm, neither of us quite knew how to cross. Finally, Caroline stepped aside. "Would you like to come in? I could make coffee." Inside, the house was chaos. Boxes everywhere, furniture in odd arrangements, walls waiting for pictures. But it was alive with possibility, with the promise of new beginnings. Tyler's action figures were already scattered across the living room floor. Emma's books lined a shelf, carefully organized despite the surrounding disorder. Caroline made coffee in silence, her movements precise and controlled. When she finally sat down across from me at the kitchen table, she said, "I owe you an apology." "Caroline." "No, please, let me say this." She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "I was terrified. When Vincent started investigating Morrison, when things got dangerous, all I could think about was protecting my children. And when you encouraged him to keep going, I thought you were being reckless. I thought you were putting your need for justice above our family's safety. I understand why you felt that way. But I was wrong. Or not wrong exactly, but incomplete in my understanding." She looked up at me. "Sarah Kincaid explained everything to me last week. How Morrison had been planning this for years, how he'd manipulated everyone including you and Vincent, how if Vincent hadn't pushed forward, Torres would still be mayor and people would still be getting hurt. She said you figured out what Morrison was doing before anyone else did, that you saw through his manipulation and used it against him." "I wouldn't say I figured it out," I demurred. "More like I stumbled through it and got lucky. Sarah said you asked exactly the right questions at exactly the right time. She said that when Morrison tried to position himself as a victim, you forced him to admit he'd been complicit, that you made sure James Feldman got immunity as part of the deal, that you insisted on verification of every piece of evidence before agreeing to anything." Caroline's eyes were intense. "She said you were the smartest person in that room, and everyone underestimated you because you're a 63-year-old woman who bakes cookies and seems harmless." I felt my cheeks warm. "Sarah exaggerates." "Does she?" Caroline reached across the table, touched my hand hesitantly. "Chrissy, I judged you. I thought you were a lonely widow living in the past, unable to let go of your husband's death. But you weren't living in the past. You were watching, waiting, understanding things the rest of us couldn't see. And when the moment came, you protected my family better than I could have. I just did what needed to be done. No, you did what none of us had the wisdom or courage to do. You fought without losing yourself. You stood up to powerful men without becoming like them. You saved my husband and my children. And I never even thanked you." Tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry, Chrissy. I'm so sorry." I squeezed her hand. "You don't need to apologize for protecting your children. That's what mothers do. But I almost destroyed my marriage doing it. When I took the kids to Seattle, when I told Vincent I wanted a separation, I was so sure I was right. And then I watched the news, saw the whole story unfold, realized that everything you and Vincent had been fighting for was real and important and necessary. She wiped her eyes. I called him that night and begged him to forgive me. And did he? He said there was nothing to forgive, that he understood my fear, that he'd been scared too, that we'd both done what we thought was best. Caroline smiled through her tears. That's the man I married, the one who sees the good in people even when they've hurt him. Vincent's truck pulled into the driveway, followed by another vehicle I didn't recognize. My son climbed out, along with Emma and Tyler, all three of them laughing about something. The other car disgorged a young couple I'd never met, carrying what looked like a housewarming gift. Neighbors, Caroline explained. They've been incredibly welcoming. The whole street has, actually. It's been nice, after everything, to be somewhere people don't know our story. But of course, everyone knew the story. It had been front-page news for 3 weeks, local and national. The Cedar Falls corruption scandal, they were calling it. Mayor Torres in federal custody, facing 23 counts of conspiracy, fraud, and corruption. Captain Morrison granted immunity in exchange for his testimony, but forced to resign from the fire department in disgrace. James Feldman given a plea deal, serving community service instead of prison time. And Vincent, my son, reinstated to his position with full back pay and a formal commendation for his integrity and courage. The new interim mayor had personally apologized to him, as had the police chief and the city council. Vincent hugged me when he came inside, holding on longer than usual. "Mom, I didn't know you were coming by. I brought dinner." "Of course you did." He kissed my cheek. "Stay and eat with us? Please? The kids have been asking about you constantly." So I stayed, and we had dinner around their makeshift dining table, a folding card table that wobbled and threatened to collapse but held. Tyler told me about his new school, about the friend he'd made who also liked dinosaurs. Emma showed me a story she'd written, 10 pages about a brave girl who solved mysteries. "She's kind of based on you, Grandma," Emma admitted. "The way you figured out who the bad guys were when even the police couldn't." "The police did excellent work," I corrected gently. "Detective Walsh especially. She helped us even when it was difficult for her." "But you started it," Emma insisted. "You made it all happen." After dinner, after the kids were in bed and the neighbors had gone home, Caroline, Vincent, and I sat in their empty living room on folding chairs, drinking wine from paper cups. "I've been thinking about the farmhouse," I said. "It's too big for me. Too isolated." "Mom, don't," Vincent said. "That's your home. It was Thomas's home. It was where we raised our family. But maybe it's time for something different." I looked around their small living room. "This house has 3 bedrooms. You'll need more space eventually. I was thinking I might sell the farm and buy something in town. Something with a guest suite, maybe, so I can have the grandchildren over whenever I want." "You don't have to do that," Caroline said. "I know I don't have to, but I want to. I've spent 5 years alone in that house, remembering what was. Maybe it's time to start building what could be." I smiled at them. "Besides, I'll want to be close by when the baby comes." They both stared at me. Caroline's hand went instinctively to her stomach. "How did you—" she started. "You've been drinking water all evening. You've touched your stomach 3 times without realizing it. And you have that look." I'd had it 3 times myself, that mixture of excitement and terror and wonder. "Congratulations." Caroline laughed, tears streaming down her face again. "We just found out yesterday. We weren't going to tell anyone yet. Your secret's safe with me, I promised." Vincent pulled his wife close, and I saw the future opening before them. New house, new baby, new beginning. Everything they'd almost lost, given back to them through persistence and courage and more than a little luck. The next morning, I drove to the Cedar Falls Cemetery. I did this every Sunday, had done it for 5 years, but this time felt different. I placed flowers on Thomas's grave, sat on the bench nearby, and talked to him the way I always did. "We got them," I said. "Torres, Morrison, all of them. It won't bring you back, but maybe it'll prevent someone else from losing what we lost. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and earth. I thought about Morrison's recordings, about how he'd spent 3 years documenting crimes while continuing to participate in them, about how he'd let my son's house burn to force the issue, to create the crisis that would expose everything. I'd never forgive him for that. Never forgive him for the years of complicity, for the deaths he could have prevented if he'd been braver sooner. But I understood him. Understood how easy it was to tell yourself that tomorrow would be the day you'd stand up, that next time you'd do the right thing, that you were just waiting for the perfect moment. Morrison had waited too long, but at least he'd eventually acted. That was more than most people did. I visited Louise Feldman on my way home. She opened the door cautiously, her face brightening when she saw me. "Chrissy, I've been hoping you'd come by. How are you holding up?" She invited me in for tea. Her house was neat, quiet, with photographs of her daughters everywhere. "James is home," she said. "His community service starts next week. He'll be working with the fire department, teaching safety classes to schools. It's fitting, in a way. And you? We're seeing a counselor. Both of us. Trying to figure out how to rebuild trust after everything that happened." She stirred her tea slowly. "I'm not sure we'll make it, but we're trying. That's all anyone can do. Chrissy, I never thanked you properly. For keeping my secret, for not telling the police about my warning before James was ready to come forward. You could have exposed us both, but you protected me. You saved my family. That debt goes both ways." She smiled sadly. "Still, thank you." I left feeling the weight of all the broken things we'd uncovered, all the lives touched by corruption and fear. Torres would go to prison, Morrison would live with his guilt, James would do his community service and try to become a better man. But the people who'd died in those fires were still dead. The families torn apart were still broken. Justice was important, necessary even, but it couldn't undo the past. It could only try to make the future better. Months later, on a cold morning, I closed on the farmhouse sale. The young couple who bought it had 3 children and plans to run a small organic farm. They loved the place the way Thomas and I had loved it. Saw the same potential, the same promise. I took one last walk through the empty rooms, remembering. Vincent learning to walk in the kitchen. Emma's first birthday party in the backyard. Thomas reading by the fireplace on winter nights, his voice rumbling through the house. "Goodbye," I whispered to the walls, to the memories, to the life I'd built and lost and finally learned to let go. My new condo was small, modern, with large windows that let in floods of light. It was in town, 3 blocks from Vincent's house, 5 minutes from the library where I'd started volunteering. Emma and Tyler had already claimed the guest bedroom, filling it with toys and books and evidence of their presence. I was arranging books on the shelf when my phone rang. Sarah Kincaid. "Chrissy, I have news. The FBI investigation just expanded. Based on Torres's testimony, they've identified corruption networks in 4 other Oregon cities, all following similar patterns. They want to know if you'd be willing to consult." "Consult how?" "Provide insight into how these operations work, how to identify patterns, how to build cases. You have a perspective they need." She paused. "They're calling you the woman who broke Cedar Falls. They want to know if you can help break the others." I thought about it. Thought about other families like mine, other firefighters like Vincent, other cities where powerful men thought they were untouchable. "Tell them I'll think about it," I said. "That's not a no." "No," I agreed. "It's not." That evening, Caroline went into early labor. We rushed her to the hospital, Vincent frantic despite his training, the kids confused and excited in equal measure. I sat with Emma and Tyler in the waiting room, reading stories, playing games, keeping them calm while their parents brought new life into the world. At 2 a.m, Vincent emerged, tears streaming down his face, holding a bundle of blankets. "Mom," he said, "meet Grace Chrissy Brennan." I took my granddaughter in my arms, felt her tiny weight, saw her perfect face. She had Thomas's nose, I thought, Caroline's eyes, the future written in every breath. "Hello, Grace," I whispered. "Welcome to the family." Vincent sat beside me, exhausted and radiating joy. "We named her after you, after what you did for us, for this family. We wanted her to have your strength. She'll have her own strength, I said. That's what matters. But I held little Grace close and felt something shift in my chest. All the pain of the past few months, all the fear and anger and grief, transformed into something new. Not forgetting, not even forgiving, but moving forward, building something good from the ashes of something terrible. Later, when everyone was settled and sleeping, I stood by the hospital window looking out at Cedar Falls. The city stretched before me, lights twinkling in the darkness, unaware of how close it had come to being consumed by corruption. But we'd stopped it. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. At 63, I'd learned that victory rarely looked the way you imagined. It wasn't dramatic or clean or satisfying in the way stories made it seem. It was complicated and messy and tinged with loss. But it was real. And real victory, earned through patience and wisdom and the willingness to stand up when standing up mattered, was worth more than any fairy tale ending. I thought about the FBI's offer, about whether I wanted to spend whatever years I had left fighting more battles, uncovering more corruption, helping more families. Maybe I did. Or maybe I just wanted to be Grandma Chrissy, who baked cookies and told stories and held babies while the world went on around her. I didn't have to decide tonight. Tonight, I was just a woman who'd survived, who'd fought, who'd won through intelligence and patience rather than force or anger. A woman who'd learned that age wasn't weakness but wisdom, that being underestimated was sometimes the greatest advantage, that the quiet strength of lived experience could topple empires. I looked down at Grace sleeping in the nursery, at Vincent dozing in the chair beside Caroline's bed, at Tyler and Emma curled up together on the waiting room couch. My family, whole, safe, together. Whatever came next, we'd face it the way we'd faced everything else. Together. And that, I thought, was victory enough for anyone. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.